All right, well, it looks like we've hit a critical mass of attendees. So welcome again, everybody, to this webinar focused on how to help decide what's important to you in a program. We have a really exciting group of panelists. They're going to share some of their thoughts and then answer some of your questions as we go on. So what we'll do to start is each of our panelists have a short PowerPoint or a short kind of point of discussion to make. But we'll first introduce everybody. We have Nicole Jarrett from Cooper. We have Scott Lifshay from Johns Hopkins, Jeff Marcus from Duke, and Greg Evans from UC Irvine. And then for those that have been at previous webinars, you know Deborah very well from Pittsburgh. So with that, I'm going to turn over first to Dr. Jarrett so she can talk a little bit about what's important to her and what she thinks you should be considering.
All right, guys, hold on one sec. Let me share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Any thumbs up? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to give a very brief intro into trying to understand what matters to you in a program, and what matters to one person is going to be different than others. So I did a little informal resident survey of my residents. I said, what were the important factors when you were looking at programs? And this is the list that they kind of gave me as I collated their results about culture, are there fellows, how many hospitals are you covering, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll dive into some of these a little bit, and then we'll obviously discuss them a little bit more as a group. So this is my 2 cents on what I think matters. So location's really important. And it's not just, do you like the city? Although that's important, most cities are pretty livable. So a lot of it has to do with other things. So what kind of external support structure do you have? Meaning, do you have family and friends nearby? Is there anyone that you know? Is it going to take you 3 connecting flights to get back to see the people that you care about? And I don't think I really understood that when I was applying. I didn't think it was important. And I think I was surprised at how nice it was to have my family close by. And then when you're talking about getting to your family, big difference between being able to drive there, a direct flight, and surprisingly connecting flights really just can hose you sometimes. And then when you look at where you're living, your cost of living, do you have to live in a small studio apartment? Or are you going to be able to have a 3-bedroom house with a backyard for your dog, et cetera? Are you able to buy, or do you have to rent? And then if you have a family or planning to start a family, and with residency 6 years long, a lot of people don't know what's going to be coming, what kind of school and daycare options are going to be available to you. In terms of the culture, and culture is something that's really, really hard to pinpoint, and particularly it's really hard this year because we don't have as much, people aren't going on as many sub-Is, you can't visit programs, but you want to try to get an idea of what kind of camaraderie exists both amongst the residents as well as between the residents and the faculty. Do the residents hang out together outside of work? I have been in programs where everyone literally lives in the same building and functions like a sleepaway camp, and I've been places where everybody at the end of the day disperses and are in really and don't really hang out outside of work. And I think they're very different environments, and you may be better suited to one versus another. Within a program, are there cliques? Are there groups? Do you feel like you may not fit in with a group? You may be on the outs. And then I've also noticed that and I noticed this as a sub-I many years ago, as well as now, that there are some programs where their residents are a little bit more competitive with one another. And some people love that because it drives them. And other people are like really turned off and they want to be singing Kumbaya. So in terms of the information on the program itself, obviously size matters, but it's also the faculty to resident ratio. So a program that's smaller but has a lot of faculty may be very different than a program that has the same number of faculty as twice as many residents. It's going to have a different dynamic. How quickly do the faculty turn over? Did they all train at the same place? If everyone has trained there, everyone does everything the same way. Is the program growing, or is the program kind of on a status quo, or maybe going down a little bit in terms of its productivity? How much is education prioritized over service? Research opportunities? Do you have a chief resident clinic? If so, is that just cosmetic? Or are you also seeing bread and butter? Call structure, and that includes everything from the frequency of call, the number of hospitals covered. I've covered 3+ hospitals in one call, and I've covered one, and they're very different beasts. You know, how well-rounded is the training that you're going to get? Fellowship can always provide additional specialized training. For a lot of things, you're always going to have to do fellowship if that's going to be your practice, but you want to make sure you get that well-rounded education. And then, are there fellows and what's their impact? So the fit is the thing you're probably looking for the most, and that may be in the top rated programs, quote unquote, or it may not. And it's, as I said, a tougher year to figure it out, but talk to as many people as you can, trust your advisors, trust your gut. If something just doesn't seem right to you, it's probably not going to be the best fit. But the thing to keep in mind is that the ACGME ensures that everyone's going to get good training. So no matter where you wind up, you will be well trained, because that is the requirement for us to have a program. So good luck to everybody, and I look forward to helping to answer some of the questions as they come.
Great, thank you. Before we move on to Dr. Lachey, our other panelist, Dr. Woodbury, was able to join us on this side of the speaker, and so Dr. Woodbury is from West Virginia, will be joining the panel as well. So, Dr. Lachey, do you want to share your introduction here?
Yep. One moment. Okay. All right. Can everybody see? Can everybody see my stuff? All right, thumbs up. Cool. All right. So a lot of what I'm going to say is very similar to what Nicole said. A few differences, as I'm sure many of us will have sort of similar ideas on this. Disclosures, my program has both independent and integrated residence. For some people that's appealing, for some people that's unappealing. When I applied to residency, there were 67 spots in the entire country. I was terrified that I would not match. So for those of you who have similar fears now, know that this has existed since there have been integrated, or even what they used to call combined programs. As Nicole alluded to at the end of her talk, there are things that every program has. Every independent program has to give you 6 clinical years, or 3 years for, every integrated program, or 3 years for an independent. There are common program requirements that all programs have to meet to stay accredited. We will residents are all assessed by the milestones criteria. All programs have to meet case experience minimums to make sure that you're well-rounded in order to be an accredited program. Here are the things that vary, and again, Nicole mentioned most of these. Is it an integrated or an independent, or both at the same institution? How many people train in your class? Some people like the attention of a smaller program, only 1 or 2 residents per year. Other people like the idea of a peer group. Maybe your program has 3 people, 4 people, 5 people in a class. Are there fellowships in the program? That may be perceived as competition for cases, or it may be perceived as more advanced specialty specific cases that you might get to see as a resident that you might not otherwise get to. How many faculty are there? And a related question, how many and how involved are the community, are the part-time faculty? All of these contribute to the character of an individual program. Location, again, are there, from a number of different reasons, are there other programs in the same city or the regional area that you're competing for patient volume? And or you may have peer groups at other programs. Do you like being in a large city or a small city? There aren't really any rural plastic surgery programs. How many clinical sites are covered by your program, both from the sense of how far will you have to go to get to your rotation service for rounds in the morning, but also, are you covering 1 or multiple places while on call? These are very relevant things. How important is research to you and to the places you're applying to? Now, one of the common program requirements is that all programs have to do scholarly activity, but there's a wide range on what is done. And it may be that that some programs that you're interested in, you may write a review article once or twice in your residency. Or you may be in a program that fully expects that you're going to write at least 1 publication a year, and maybe you're expected to do an academic enrichment year or research year. Some programs have this as an optional. A few programs actually have it as a requirement. You may find that that is a great and appealing thing. You may find that that is totally unappealing and you do not want that at all. Think about these things as they affect what your interests are. Similarly, how involved are the faculty and the residents at your program in national organizations? If that's something that's important to you, You may decide it is, and a program appeals to you more because of it. You may decide it's not important, it's distracting. I don't want to have a week when my faculty are all away at a meeting and I'm not doing cases. Mission trips may be important to you. How many are done relative to the number of residents and faculty in the program? Where do they go? What types of surgeries are they done? Are they hand missions, cleft missions, other things? You may or may not have an interest in uncommon treatments. Does the program you're looking at do composite tissue allotransplantation, face, hands, or other body parts? Gender affirmation surgery. Now, granted, is becoming a part of more programs, but is still not present in absolutely every program. This may or may not be something that's of interest to you. Where do the trainees go when they are done? Do they tend to go out into practice right away? Do they tend to choose specialties where they do fellowships? What type of practice settings do they go into? Do they go hang out a shingle into private practice? Do they go into groups, either big groups or small groups? If they go into groups, do they find those groups based on who is near where they train? And regardless, do people stay in the area where they trained? Are you interested in academics or the new kind of privatemics model, which is often sort of private practice, but residents rotate with you? All of these are questions that are worth asking. All of these are things that may be different from one program to another, and any one or many of these may appeal or may not appeal to you. But be thinking about these things as far as what you think may matter to you as you're looking at a program. So as has been mentioned and is going to be mentioned, there isn't a best program. There isn't a perfect fit for everybody. Asking these questions will help each of you figure out what appeals to me. And there are 83 programs. There are lots of places where people can go to. So it's worth your trouble to sort of figure out where would you go if it were purely your choice to make. All right, that's all my slides.
Thanks, Scott. Dr. Woodbury. You're on mute, I think. Perfect. I don't know if you want to share kind of your introductory thoughts. Oh, perfect.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff, for the opportunity. I am going to share a little bit here with you my thoughts on understanding what matters, and see if we can get it on the screen. So understanding what matters to you in a program, I am in a fairly new residency program, and I'm glad that we have a diversity of panelists here today. One of the things that I would say about our program here at West Virginia University is that we are in our 5th year in the residency program, so we have not had a graduate yet. And we also practice a little bit more in a rural setting in West Virginia, in the mountains of Appalachian Mountains. And so as we were talking earlier about the city, the size, the location, I think for some applicants, there's a variety of what they're looking for. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So finding out the right fit for the program, you don't want to allow your program director or your faculty members to try to squeeze you into the program that's the right fit for them. And so I think a lot of times as students, we're looking for faculty to give us some advice, but you have to realize that it's ultimately your decision, and it's your decision to decide what you're really looking for, whether it's the size, the location, how far you are from family or friends, and looking primarily at the culture of the program. So although our program is fairly new, I think we have a lot of innovative ideas here in our program. When you're looking at the program, you're looking at the faculty. Do you fit with the faculty? Do you share their passions and their visions? What are they looking for the future of the program? You're going to be there for 6 years or 7 or more. And so you want to know, what is the program like and what is the future? What is the program director's goal or mission or vision? And you want to have a clear understanding of how that program might progress over the years that you're there. In terms of the residents, these are going to be your friends. They're like family often, depending on the size of the program. We have a smaller program taking 1 resident per year. And so the residents here tend to get along really well, and you have to when you're in a small program, as opposed to being in a very large program where there may be a little bit of flexibility to form groups within the larger group. In terms of the staff, knowing what you're getting into, if we have APPs who help out with a lot of work on the floor, And so that gives our residents an opportunity to get to the operating room a little bit more and the clinic. And so knowing what your responsibilities will be as you progress throughout the residency program. The people also will be important. I'm not going to talk about the faculty, residents, and staff. We've talked about them, but let's talk about the patients that you're going to take care of. The administration. Are the patients that you're seeing in clinic every day and in the operating room and in the emergency department, the types of patients that you're expecting to see when you go out into practice. It's difficult to go into, for example, a rural setting where you've never taken care of patients from that setting. You've always been in a big city where you've had resources. Perhaps in programs such as ours, our patients don't have access to care. So they come in with diseases and processes that are pretty significant. You know, a tumor may have grown several centimeters because the patient hasn't had an opportunity to get access to care. So we see a large spectrum in terms of patient, the depth of cases and breadth of cases. And those are the things that you want to look at specifically. Asking the residents specifically, what do you see when you're in clinic? What do you see when you're in the operating room? What types of cases that you do? And then also the administrators, how supportive they are of the residency program. When you're in residency, one of the things I like to tell the residents, particularly some of the young women, they ask, you know, how do I meet a spouse or a significant other? And so if you're in a residency program where there are other GME programs around, we have, for example, a dental program, we have OMF programs, law school, and so there are a lot of people around who might be potential mates. So those are the things also to consider that we haven't talked about. Location we've talked about. Do you like water? Do you like mountains? Do you like outdoor activity? Things that are going to get you out on the weekends and keep you sane, decrease the stress. You want to make sure you've got opportunities for entertainment to do things that you enjoy, whether it's nightlife in a big city or hiking in the mountains. You want to consider the cost of living where you're going to be. What is your resident salary and what are the benefits that they give you? For example, some programs may give travel expenses to meetings. How many meetings can you attend? What about getting loops and iPads and other resources that you would need? Book funds for your residency education. And you want to look at transportation. Are there options? We had one resident who came in and her car broke down as soon as she got here. Not realizing we don't have a huge public transportation system here in Morgantown. And so knowing that, you know, you have to catch Uber back and forth, biking around, what are the options for you if you have transportation issues, gas and all of those things. So you want to consider that entire package when you're looking at your cost of living and your resources. And then the academic training, we talked about the curriculum, the research. What about away rotations? Our residents do go away for several rotations. What are the costs associated with those away rotations? What types of fellowships do the residents get? And does the program give you any information about practice management? Two of our faculty members came from private practice settings, and so there's a lot that's instilled into the program about practice management. And those are the things that are going to help you in the future. Thank you.
Great, Dr. Evans.
Thank you.
I think our most senior panelist today.
Somebody, I have to have Carrie unview the screen. There we go. Yeah, there's somebody else that's sharing the screen, so I can't do it. There we go. All right, let's try it again.
Here.
There we go. Let's try that. Perfect. So I'm taking a little more philosophical standpoint, probably because I'm a little bit older and that kind of moves that along. I just thought this was kind of funny. So I think, you know, when you're looking at residency programs, and I realize all you guys are young at the moment and you don't really kind of know maybe what your practice is going to be, but if you're certainly your entire life you wanted to be in private practice, and in some ways there are more programs that are associated with that or a tool to that versus, let's say, academics. But the bottom line is there's no ideal job. And I think what's also good is that if you guys can kind of develop a plan for yourself, you know, develop your own strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and what, you know, the quote threats are in the program. And if you want, more than you understand yourself, the better to fit in any type of program. I think all of us know that there's no ideal program, right? Each of the program has positive and negative strengths to it. All programs have challenges to it, right? All programs kind of cycle. But no matter, as everybody has said, wherever you go, we have enough oversight through the ACGME that you're going to get good training. So we have a lot of topics we're talking about tonight. People talked about location, but not only location of where you want to live, but if you really want to practice in a city, sometimes it's easier to do a residency there, just because then you get to know the people in the private practice, and it gives you an opportunity perhaps to have a job when you come out of training, or in a structured hospital-based component as well. Just remember that turnover in every institution is common. You know, it's common in any job, it's common in any academic institution, but I think what's critical is really what's the institutional commitment towards the division or the department, and is there enough depth to the faculty? But if everybody leaves, so to speak, in your second year, if you have a commitment from either Department of Surgery or the institution that they're going to support plastic surgery in that institution, then you know that good people are going to come in. So again, grand dreams are not become significant realities through the action of a single person. It's not about one individual at one institution that you should go towards. It's a group, right? And change is common. We have to cope with that. We have to look at articulating a vision, and you have to participate in that. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I think what's also interesting, that really kind of what happens most on a division or department level will really not affect the residency program. I would say that the vast majority of the decisions that we make don't really affect the residents. It has to do with institutions and clinic flow and so forth. But you really want to make sure that the division or department has some type of autonomy. You want to know that in your first or second or third year, you're going to be a plastic surgery resident and not part of the, let's say, the general surgery program, which used kind of a combined program like it kind of used to be. Again, look and see how the division or department is viewed in the institution, and do you have a clinical and/or research focus, and does it fit your personality? That's really kind of the key. And do you have an opportunity to contribute towards a change? And we all have residents in our faculty meetings and also the program director meetings, and they have a great deal of input into what moves forward. Look at your opportunities for fellowship, job placements. What fits? What is sort of like dating? And, it's kind of like, what are we looking for? Well, we're hiring people that are going to fit into a group of 18 people that they're going to see probably more frequently than their families. So you want people that are going to fit into the personality types of both the faculty and the residents there. Tommy Lasorda said, it's my responsibility to get 25 guys to really work for the name on the front of the shirt and not on the back. So again, it's not about any one individual. It's about a team concept. And I guess the only other thing I would say is that, enjoy the 6 years, right? Cervantes says the journey is better than the end. It is a very rigorous program, but it's the best opportunity in your entire life to learn, right? John Wooden said successions for succeeding. Hustle makes up for a lot of many mistakes, and the harder you work, the more luck you will have. And you're going to make mistakes, and we all understand that. But the key from them is to learn from them, right? Not to repeat them again. And any program should be supportive of that concept. It's kind of interesting. Part of the whole process, and what I think is fascinating, that at the end of the match process, we kind of find out where the medical students matched into. And it's really interesting how they sort of match into programs that I think personality-wise fits them well. When John Wooden was looking at a job at UCLA and Minnesota, there was a huge snowstorm and all the lines went dead to Minnesota. UCLA got a hold of him first. He accepted the job. Minnesota called him the next day. And obviously, he came out to UCLA. But fate has a little component to that as well. And finally, find a mentor. And these can be a variety of mentors, professional, leadership, spiritual. I think mentors are key, and it will help direct your career. So I think in summary, every challenge is an opportunity. Every door that closes opens another. You get out of what you put something into, right? All the opportunities are there for really any program you guys go to in the United States, but you have to take advantage of them. And 6 years is a very short period of time. That's my email. You guys are always welcome to email me. I'd be happy to respond if you guys have any specific questions. So thank you very much, Jeff, for putting this together. I really appreciate that.
Great, and I'm going to introduce our last speaker, and it's actually a nice transition because we're going to start kind of talking about some of these items specifically, especially I think the hotter topics that are out there. And so with that, before I introduce and let Dr. Marcus give his presentation, part of when we put this together is hoping that we can provide you with a number of factors for you to consider. Ultimately, you need to go home, or you probably are at home already, but think really hard about what matters to you and pick those 3 or 4 things and then use those to evaluate the program. And that's what we're trying to provide, is all the things that you might want to consider. You obviously can't consider all of them, but you need to figure out what's important to you, and what's important to person A may be very different than what's important to person B. So that's really kind of our goal here. And with that, I want to get into one of the hotter topics, is the idea of program rankings. And Dr. Marcus has a special interest in this research-wise, so I'll turn it over to him now.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Jeff? Great. Let's see if I can do this. Okay. So my name is Jeff Marcus. I'm from Duke, and I'm going to talk about doximity. And Dr. Kozlow is right. I do have a fair bit of interest in this. 80% of all medical students are said to participate or to use or to look at doximity in the course of making their decisions for residency. 80%. That's pretty significant. Doximity is intended to be a place for transparent information to be shared with medical students to make these decisions. But I'm going to share just with you a little bit of transparency about the doximity system as well, that might be helpful to you to understand their history and what they provide. So a few things. First of all, Doximity is a company that was formed in 2011 in San Francisco. And so around that time, social media was beginning to boom. It was a transition between things like MySpace was going to transition over to, there was more. Facebook was going to be the newest thing. And as I said, Doximity began as a social media platform and meant to provide a networking platform for physicians. That was its full intention at the time. And it had actually fairly slow growth, especially early on. They had, between 2011 and 2013, they got somewhere around 200,000 members. And if you think about what a social media business model is, basically, as we know this now, but in 2011, these things were evolving. The profit is directly tied to the magnitude of the membership. That is it. It's not through the fees for the services, because they don't typically charge the members fees for any of the services that they provide. And to date, Doximity still does not charge a fee for the services that they're providing, but they derive their profit from marketing and services to third parties who are interested in the membership or the demographics of that membership. So this is all, I guess, pretty, duh. Now everybody understands this is how social media works. But that's not what it was at that time. And so what they needed to do was to add, certain value adds. What kinds of things did they do? Why would physicians want to join another group? Well, for one, they did provide some secure inter-collaborator communication access, so you could communicate with your colleagues. Eventually, they then added a news and media feed. And then over time, they also added something called a fax receiver. I don't even know if we have a fax machine in my office anymore, but fax machine, need to be able to receive faxes from other offices. And they did that automatically. You could do that eventually coming through the phone. And then more recently was something called the Doximity Dialer, which is basically where you can dial your patients on your cell phone, and it basically provides a dummy phone number, which is your office phone number. So your call appears to originate from your office, and you're not sharing your own number. And they do this now during the COVID pandemic. They introduced a video chat option, which also followed the same sort of guidelines. So these were really good, value adds, but they weren't the original things that they had. All they had originally, as I said, was their social media platform. In 2014, they made a decision, which ended up being a fairly fateful decision, which was to partner with U.S. News and World Report. Well, at that time, U.S. News and World Report was, and they still are, providing a lot of different rankings in a variety of things like colleges, universities, graduate schools, medical schools, a whole litany of things. And when they first partnered up on this, the idea was that Doximity would then provide the subjective reputation scoring. So this would be, in fact, I'll go back here. In 2014 was the first time they announced that they were going to do a resident program ranking. And so what they did was they looked at, they had 50,000 peer nominations. I don't know, and I can't tell you whether that was 50,000 different people who submitted some nominations, but that's what they had. And they created these rankings in 2014, and they were based purely on the subjective peer nominations from members of their platform, and that was it. And that was how they started. So again, this was basically, it's a subjective ranking system, and it came from simply and only peer nominations. If you look at U.S. News and World Report and what they do in other things, now they also provide rankings of specialties in their best hospitals surveys. So when you look at this, you have rankings that are for the following specialties. These are the specialties that are ranked by U.S. News and World Report. And in a comparison to the subjective rankings that are used, that were used initially in Doximity, this was more rigorous. But at first, when this started in 2014 and 15, even U.S. News and World Report, when they were ranking specialties, weighted the Doximity subjective nomination process as 50% of the total ranking of each of these specialties. Well, there was a backlash to that because, of course, these specialties felt as though that was not representative. And so currently, they've actually decreased the contribution or weight of the subjective portion. So this is in the U.S. News and World Report specialty ranking. Notice that plastic surgery is not here. And it wasn't then, it's still not now, it's not clear when we will be. And so there is no specific other ranking system in plastic surgery other than what Doximity is doing. So if you go to Doximity now and you want to look at the Residency Navigator, again, what they described was it was a tool to help medical students make informed decisions and increase transparency in the match process. But let's just kind of look at what that does. So this is the Navigator now. I don't know if hopefully you can all see this, but let's look at this in live time. So we'll go down and we'll go to plastic surgery integrated, and then we'll select by. Okay, what's select by? Select by, these are the categories. I'll show you this in a minute. Reputation, research output, size of program, percent specialized, board certified, and then simply alphabetical. Of course, you can then look at by location, and then what they would characterize. These are newer features on here as well. So when you look live, these are the things that you get. Notice that the default typically is going to be on that reputation. So these are the elements. Number one is satisfaction. So if you look at any particular program page, you'll find satisfaction data from the residents of that program who have graduated. Please note that they have to, they have to also be members, and I'll mention that again in a minute. And then they have the rankings. So there's satisfaction data, and then there are the rankings. And I mentioned already, there's reputation, research output, size of program, percent specialized, percent board certified, and alphabetical. Only input registered from members of Doximity. Unless they are members of Doximity, there is no input into this system. It's pretty interesting. So if you think about this now, if you go through them and you go through that, well, of course, the alphabetical listing, you go through the percent board certified, the percent who specialize, or even the size of the program where there's some variation, but not a great deal of variation. And you can't get into some of the other things that had been, some of the other presenters had mentioned, such as the faculty to resident ratio. That wouldn't really necessarily be there. If you look at these items in red, in plastic surgery, there's not a whole lot of differentiation among the programs. In other specialties, that might not be the case, but such it is with us. If you look at research output, how do they measure research output? Research output in this system is based on the H-index of the graduates of the program. So it isn't based on an H-index, as you may know, is basically a numerical rating given to the impact factors of the publications that the subjects had presented or who had written in. But so every individual. So I have an H-index, and Dr. Jarrett has an H-index, and Dr. Kozlow, and so on. But this research output here is based on the H-index of the graduates, not on the faculty members, and not on the current residents. So you have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. It is, it's a reasonable, it's an objective measure, unlike the subjective measure, but just to know what it is. So, but that basically leaves really just, what's left is this reputation. So what is the reputation factor? What goes into that? Well, basically, if you're a Doximity member, then you can vote once a year on what you think are the top 5 programs in the country. So it would make sense that the more Doximity members who vote for a particular program, then the higher the placement would be. And since self-nomination is permitted, a member may vote for his or her own program, or the one they graduated, or the one in which they currently work. So that does cause some problems in a way. It means that the programs that have the greatest number of graduates, i.e. the largest programs or those who had the longest tenure, would have the most number of people who would be eligible to vote if they were members. Also, those programs that have a large number of fellows as well. So this has a tendency to put, for some programs, to put a concerted effort on communication with the residents, the fellows, and the alumni and the faculty to all participate in the process, because they can directly affect, really what the outcome is. One thing to note, though, too, is that I mentioned U.S. News and World Report, which had reduced that initial contribution. So I mentioned that these specialty rankings, they significantly devalued that reputation score based on the pushback that had occurred. And so now it's only a very small contribution. So this is an interesting fact as well. From 2011, when they were founded, to 2013, they were able to increase their membership to include up to 10% of physicians in the United States. In 2014, when they launched the Residency Navigator, they captured 40% of the US physicians. By 2020, they now have over 70% of all US physicians, which is greater than the AMA, and it's greater than all users who are currently on the Epic platform. So it's a fairly significant group of people. But despite all of this, Doximity has never engaged with any organized plastic surgery group to participate in the process that would create a ranking system that's relevant to the specialty. So, I think all of the presenters today provided some really good information. And I urge you to take the advice that you're hearing today and take the advice of your mentors and although there is some useful information you may find on Doximity, take it with a grain of salt.
Well, thanks, Dr. Marcus, for that input. And I actually don't know what the rankings look like this year. I would have to guess, based on the size of your program, that yours would be theoretically higher on there. So you're actually here presenting, I think, an honest opinion of things, despite it's something that, would in a way help your recruitment probably. And I appreciate you being upfront and honest about that and some of the details with it.
I think like every presenter has already said that, I think the most important things have to do with the elements of fit. And what are elements of fit? They're things that what's important to you as an individual, not what's important to me and not what's important to all the rest of my colleagues. And I mean, I think to me, as far as this particular system goes, the fairness issue bothers me about it. I made certain recommendations to ACAPS, and some other specialties have actually really taken some action. The emergency physicians have actually boycotted it completely. I think that if they just eliminated the self-nominations, I think they could make the whole process a lot more useful. But the problem is that then how many people would then clamor to become members to then vote if they weren't even able to vote for their own program? And since this is all about increasing and maintaining membership for them as far as their profit engine, I don't know that they would do that.
Other thoughts on ranking systems, since we just kind of talked about that from our panelists?
Well, I think there's definitely a disadvantage for newer programs, such as our program at West Virginia University. We have not had a graduate yet, and it makes it difficult for an applicant who's comparing our program to other programs out there. So I think there's an unfair advantage there.
Yeah, that's a good point though, Carrie, that, if a program, if a program were to be, if it were new, or if an independent program transitioned to be an integrated program, that could cause problems, because I could say that in our case, we have a program that started in 1947, but it took me 3 years for them to use the data from all of the years during the independent, years in order to, to acknowledge what the contributions of the graduates were. They only looked at the, however many years it was at the time, if we were, 2 years or 3 years or whatever it was at the time of integrated, that was it. And there are other programs going through that type of transition too. So you have to be aware of that.
I'm going to trading topics for a second, one of the ones that I think was brought up earlier is this idea of stability. I can tell you that when I was applying, it was a big deal to me that one of the programs I was interested in had a chair that was stepping down, and it was unknown who was next. And I, to this day, and I mean, my training was awesome. I'm glad it worked out the way that it did, but I look back and completely, in my mind, overvalued that, or how critical that was. But what are the opinions of everyone else? Nicole?
I think Dr. Evans actually said it. I think it was Dr. Evans who said it well, which was that it, or maybe it was Dr. Lefshay, I apologize. That part of it is the commitment to the institution. So if the institution is committed to the division or the department, you know, as people cycle, as there always will be some turnover, you're going to be rest assured that they're going to get somebody else in that's good. But it, you know, it is, we all like the known, right? So it's, we all get very uncomfortable when we don't know what's coming next. And so I think that's where the anxiety comes in on the part of the applicants. But as long as the entire faculty isn't turning over, I think that the culture generally stays pretty stable. But it's, you know, a smaller program is definitely going to be a little bit more, there's going to be a little bit more reactivity to one or two people leaving, as opposed to a big program where it would take a massive number of people leaving to really change anything.
Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Evans.
Yeah, hi, it's Greg. And I just, I'm the one who kind of said that. And I threw that out there because I agree with you, Nicole, that people put a lot of emphasis on that. But the reality is, you know, people come and go, and 6 years is a long time. And you're going to have some change and turnover that's going to happen during those 6 years. And it's just a natural evolution of any type of program. But I guess my biggest thing is that don't be worried about that, right? That's not something that, I mean, it's not going to, you know, unless everybody leaves at once, that ultimately will not probably affect your educational experience. And you never know who you're going to get. I mean, I was coming to Hopkins and Jack Hoop stepped down 2 weeks before I started and Paul Manson took over. And for me, you know, Paul has been a mentor throughout my entire career. So, you know, embrace the change a little bit and not worry, put too much depth into having stability, because change is just a part of what we all do.
You know, the advice that I got when I was applying was the program that you graduate from is going to be different than the program that you start in, no matter where you go, just because of that natural attrition and because people move around. So I think going in expecting that there will be turnover would probably serve you better than expecting that things will stay the same. And again, the types of questions about turnover should be not so much will there be turnover, will the chair be there, but rather what's the process when there is turnover? How does the program recruit? Are all of the faculty involved? Is it just the decision of a small group of people? Do other departments get involved? Because those sorts of questions will end up telling you about the culture of the institution. And that will probably reflect in how the department or division runs.
Dr. Lefshay, I know you were trying to answer that question as well.
Most of what I was going to say has already been said. I will tell you from a faculty and program director's perspective, I wish there were a way to sort of train people out of what either they believe or others have told them to do. I know I was told this as a med student too, but I've seen, based on the questions I've asked and how we've done on rank lists and stuff, the difference between a year when our chair had just stepped down and we were recruiting but didn't know who our chair was going to be, and then the following year where everybody was excited that a new chair was coming in. And I will tell you from the day-to-day of how the department worked and how the program worked, there was a minimal real difference. It's a perceived difference, but I agree with everybody that it's not a real difference. And it's probably not worth your time nearly as much as other things that we've talked about tonight as far as deciding whether a program's right for you.
Dr. Woodbury, you had made a comment, I'm just going to switch gears here, that it was actually something that I don't think we even had in our kind of, you know, our pre-webinar brainstorming, but it struck a chord with me. This idea of the patients that you are taking care of, in the location. And I've never, in reality, it was a factor for me. I never thought of it that way. Can you elaborate a little bit on, why you think that's important, and how to figure that out about a program?
So being in the Appalachian area is new for me. I grew up in Nashville and trained in Ohio, Baltimore, and Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. So coming to West Virginia was a new setting for me, and I encountered situations and patients that I honestly felt were out of what I was accustomed to. And so we do have a medical school that focuses on rural education. And when I came here, many of the faculty members told me we are the model for rural education. I didn't quite understand that until I started to meet the patients. It's a different patient population. They're very genuine, but the fact that patients will come to us with such complexity of diseases was something that I wasn't accustomed to. I couldn't imagine a patient rolling a grapefruit-sized tumor on the leg where it was totally obvious, and having patients saying, I just, put it off, or I didn't have a doctor to tell me to come to a tertiary care center, or not knowing what to do. And so we encounter situations like that daily here in Morgantown. And I thought that when we had applicants coming through, they would ask, what are the patients like? And many of them said, I want to be in a setting like this. And so patients, residents who are looking for that type of patient population, whether they grew up in that environment and they want to serve those patients, they want to work in an underserved community, I think those are important aspects that I didn't think about before I came to Morgantown.
Other thoughts on that topic from our other panelists?
I agree. I think a lot of it depends on your institution's mission. And so if you're in an institution, and I think ours also has a very strong commitment to serving the underserved, you're going to have that population as a large part of your training. That doesn't mean it's your only population, but it's going to be a part of your training. And for some people who are really, that is their drive to go into medicine, that's fantastic. And for other people who really want to go into private practice cosmetic surgery, that's not a great fit. And so part of it is being honest. And, when people go on interviews, I would say 90% will kind of say, oh, I want to be an academic, but be honest with yourself. What do you really want to do? Where do you really want to see yourself going? And it's okay if it's not in academia. Most plastic surgeons are not in academia. So if that's not what you want to be a private practice cosmetic surgeon in a glitzy area, then find a program that's going to give you more of that than a program that's going to expose you to things that aren't what you like.
So when I tell all my graduates, I always tell them that, I don't really care what you do, but just give back to the specialty somehow, right? Whether it's giving money to the foundation, whether it's working in a clinic, whether it's going on mission trips, whether it's, whatever the long list is, but it doesn't have to be academics. So there are a lot of opportunities to give back to this specialty, and that's I think what we should be doing as we finish our careers.
So we have a question from the audience about integrated programs that also have independent tracks as well. And I think there's a mix of programs, and should that be a factor or not? Dr. Marcus, I'll go with you first here. And I don't know all of our programs, which ones are mixed, but.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because there's basically two ways this is going to happen. Number one would be if the program is running two tracks simultaneously in a purposeful way, in which they have a number of residents coming through an integrated program, and then they also are going to interview every year for a certain number of independent residents out of their general surgery, ortho, ENT, whatever, or other training. The other is if they're in transition, so it could be an independent program transitioning to integrated, in which you would have both groups of residents working simultaneously. I've witnessed situations. I've not been a part of a program that ran two tracks at the same time. Dr. Lifshake could probably comment a little there, but I have worked through a couple of transitions. I've been involved with a couple of transitions. One where the transition was great, the other one where the transition was a little challenging. And I think that what it gets down to is, trying to get a sense from the residents. ACAPS is making available a lot of opportunities for students to interact with residents, in addition to the interviews, but there are other opportunities to interact with them. and to try to get a flavor of what's going on there. And, you know, if you have a concern about the fact that, you know, you would be working with these more mature, you know, residents who've already graduated, is that going to be challenging, problematic? Are they going to be, you know, talking down to me? You have to just talk to them and find out, you know, how's it going? How are they all getting along together? I think that's really the only way.
If I can add a little bit to that, as Dr. Marcus mentioned, we do have both integrated and independent residents. I think there are a couple of things are relevant. Number one, it typically means a bigger program if it's a program that's deliberately having both at the same time with the intent to be continuity. Meaning, I don't know of any programs that have one independent and one integrated. They're typically bigger groups. And two, the good and the bad answer is the same thing, and that is these are trainees who know a different way of learning how to do things. And it's good in the sense of, you know, not everyone is training in the same environment with the same faculty, at least not the whole time. They've learned from other people, their general surgery skills or otolaryngology skills, or less commonly orthopedic or urology or neurosurgery skills. They typically come with good leadership and maybe even some mentorship skills, usually, not always. Conversely, they're very junior learners with a lot of experience, and there are challenges that come with that. People talk about untraining the general surgeon out of people, and I think it's exaggerated, but not zero. There are moments where things like that do have to happen. And so for any one program, or at least speaking for my program, this is something every year we talk about. Do we continue to believe that this is a good idea to do this on purpose? And so far our answer continues to be yes. But it's deliberately choosing people at very different stages of their surgical learning, and maybe even different life stages, deliberately to have them there together learning from each other. Whether it's having a 30-year-old integrated chief resident supervising a 35-year-old independent first-year resident, or conversely, the now chief resident independent resident who's been at this, 8, 9, 10 years, who can really be a mentor, not just a chief resident, to the intern who's just trying to figure out his or her way through the hospital. So there's a lot of good and a lot of bad that comes with it. And it needs to be a well thought out decision. For us so far, it's been a good decision.
Dr. Woodbury, I saw your hand came up there.
Yes, I was also thinking about sometimes this question comes up with students, and my thought is that the independent residents sometimes have not had as much experience specifically in plastic surgery. And so they may have gotten a little bit of exposure throughout their general surgery track, but not as much as some of our integrated residents who may be at a lower level of postgraduate residency with more experience in plastics in particular. But the independent resident may have more maturity and experience in other aspects of patient care. So I do agree with Scott that it's important to work together and take advantage of the situation for both people.
I don't love the family analogies as they are applied to the workplace. But that being said, having the dynamics of the program with integrated residents and independent residents is very much like siblings. In a lot of ways, it's great to have a lot of siblings with a lot of different experiences and a lot of different perspectives, and those siblings can help you. On the other hand, there are times when those siblings can have other needs that the program also needs to focus on. So that's sort of the way we have a integrated and independent program together, and that's sort of the dynamic that I've seen, that the independent residents bring something to the table, the integrated residents bring something to the table, but there is negotiation within the program about negotiating the different needs.
So, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know especially for the students, this is a very, very busy week. I think with meet and greets and this basically taking up 3 hours every night here. But we have kind of one more question here from the audience. Can we expand on the pros and cons of having fellows and what that means.
I will start by saying we do not have fellows, and so our residents, even at a very early postgraduate level, get a significant amount of advanced instruction and learning and opportunities in the operating room, and they love it. So that's one of the advantages of not having fellows.
Other thoughts on fellows?
I think that there's, when you have fellows, there are, as people have said, there are pros and cons. I think that you tend to sometimes be operating with the fellow instead of operating with the attending. And in a program that didn't have fellows, in that case, it may be more one-on-one with the attending. Some people love that though, because it's a little bit less high stress, that you feel like a little bit like you're on the hot seat a little bit less, and they may really enjoy that. And as I think somebody else mentioned, I also think it means that if you have a fellowship, you're clearly getting the complexity of cases in order to have fellows, but there are plenty of programs that have plenty of, you know, for example, we have more micro than we could ever staff. We don't have a micro fellow, but that means that everybody's doing micro. And in fact, some of the micro cases go uncovered. So there are pluses and minuses to everything. But I think for some people it's a big turn off, and other people enjoy the fact. And if you're in a bigger program, pretty much, I don't think there are any really big residency programs, if that's something you're interested in, that don't have fellows, and that's just part of being in a larger institution.
One other thing I would like to just throw out, just in support of fellows, I think it's also another opportunity for near-peer learning. You know, as much as I like to think of myself as young at heart, I'm 15 years out of training, and I recognize that my interns and 2s and 3s may think of me as somebody much older than taking them through a case. For some of the cases, especially later in the year, the fellow can take the junior resident through the case, and I can either be in the next room or sitting at the end of the table or that sort of thing. And not only can it potentially be a lower stress environment, but sometimes it's even a more effective teaching model that a fellow closer to remembering of, you know, okay, here's what I didn't get when I was doing this. Some junior learners will find that's a very effective teaching model for them. So, and I agree with Nicole's point of larger institutions tend to have at least some of them, depending on the subspecialty. But I think there's good, not just the need to avoid bad when fellows are at an institution.
Well, I want to thank everybody for participating tonight. It's 9 o'clock, so I want to be respectful again of everyone's time. You know, for the students out there, the meet and greets continue, I know, this week and through the rest of this month and even a little bit into September. As we're trying to provide, you know, you an opportunity to learn about all the programs. And there's going to be some additional webinars, although the pace slows down a little bit until we get closer to kind of I'll say the real deal, but when things start kind of moving again in the fall. But please, if you have other topics or things that you think ACAPS can help provide information on, please let us know. We really want to do this for you, and the whole goal of this program is all student-centric. So with that, thank you everybody for participating tonight, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next webinar and events.